Well, Kevin, we're going to start some nation-building talk now.
This is good stuff.
Okay.
You brought in the heavy hitters. This is wonderful.
Okay, Chris, we're going to talk about trust and your money. And trust has got a lot to do with how we handle our economy. And so do you actually trust our Canadian economy? That's a scary question. So to help us figure out the groundwork of our economy and how Christianity might interact with that, we're joined by Brian Dijkema, who's the program director with Cardis and the senior editor with Comment Magazine. And we're also joined by Sean Speer. He's a Monk Senior Fellow for Fiscal Policy at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute and a former senior economic advisor to the Prime Minister. Gentlemen, welcome. It's great to have us. And I think this is where the economy starts for me. And Brian, let's start here. You write about as soon as money is introduced into any situation, people change. So economy and people are very connected. How do people change when it becomes about money?
Yeah, money doesn't have to change you. It almost always does, though. There are ways in which we use money every day. It's involved in everything, whether it's a marriage or a church. You need money to pay for things, buildings and so on. What's interesting, though, is that money, when you use it, it makes you think in a certain way, right? It's a matter of conserving the limited amounts that you have. Very few of us have unlimited amounts of money. So you always have to make decisions about how am I going to spend this scarce resource. So it's a way of thinking. In many ways, it's a good way of thinking. You don't want to spend too much. You have to, make sure you've got a surplus at the end of the day. You try to grow your money and so on. And that's a good thing when it comes to buying bread, when it comes to buying services and so on. But when you take that way of thinking, the habits that you take when you're spending money, and you move it into other areas of life, say a marriage, or say even a state, and you think only in those terms, what you've done is you've actually moved something that's not economic into certain habits that are economic. And what happens then is you actually start to undermine those non-economic things, and ultimately you undermine the economy.
Wow. Okay, let's just go over to the Prime Minister's office now, because Sean, you worked for over 8 years for Prime Minister Harper as an advisor to his economic policy. Does that kind of conversation come in at the government level, or what are the government's concerns about shaping economy?
It's a great question. I mean, the thing that I think drives all politicians across the political spectrum is a real focus on the experiences and the conditions of regular people. And so you won't be surprised to discover so much of economic policy is developed and thought about with jobs in mind, because of course, as Brian says, not only does paid employment have implications for our ability to cover our costs and choose our preferences. I mean, we also know, of course, that paid work has more important implications than that, non-economic ones, the dignity and the self-actualization that comes with work. And so, of course, we fervently disagree about the best way to create the conditions for employment and attracting investment and all the rest. But I do like to think that we share common objectives, and it's those objectives that really dictated the work that I did in the Prime Minister's office, and certainly the work that the Prime Minister did at the time.
So they actually thought this is going to affect how people treat each other.
Yes, the extraordinary thing, of course, is because the idea that paid work is critical to understanding how one sees him or herself, how they interact with their family, how they interact with the community. This isn't hearsay or speculation. I mean, there is a large body of research that shows the non-economic implications of paid work, and I think that's certainly something that inspired the Prime Minister. It's certainly something that inspired me. And Lorna, as we think about what we're witnessing in the U.S. With Mr. Trump's election, largely on the result of a growing concern on the large parts of the population about the future of work, what they were yearning for was not just a paycheck. What they were yearning for is the dignity, the self-respect, the self-actualization that comes with work. And at its core are some of the principles and the values that this program and the ministry uphold.
Okay. Do you think there's actually, with all the distrust in the world, So let's take it from my perspective. From us Canadians, do you think we're able to actually trust that, A, the government has our best interest at heart, and that they can actually do what's necessary to help our economy grow?
Well, I mean, he's the political fellow. You have to ask him. But what's interesting is there is a growing distrust on almost all levels of institutions. Government is one of them. Finance is another one. There's a major challenge with trust in the financial industry. It came after the crash. And that's a real challenge because trust is absolutely integral to a functioning economy. It helps us, it's contract. Economy is based on making a deal, an agreement, and then holding to it. And if you can't trust the other person to hold to it, you actually start to build up barriers and build up walls, sometimes literally. And what that does is it actually slows down the economy. And in fact, many studies have showed that where there are higher levels of trust, you have lower costs, it's easier to do business with someone you trust.
Wow. Okay, we're going to be back about building this moral framework that goes alongside the economy. And Sean, I loved it that you said, yeah, you need 100 Huntley Street to help build that. I never thought of us as part of the economy and strengthening the economy. Okay, so stay tuned. We're going to be back with Sean Speer and Brian Dijkema right after this.